What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdeljabbar. Danny, what's going on, man? Happy birthday.
Thanks, man. I'm chilling. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. For everyone who's listening right now, it's Danny Abdeljabbar's birthday.
It's my 10th anniversary of turning 21, guys.
It's 10th anniversary. What are you, a chick?
Yeah.
This is the 8th time I've turned 27 years old. I know so many girls who make that joke. They're like, I'm turning 27 for the 4th time.
Hooray.
Hooray. 27 is always that age that you want to stay. It's like that forever 27. It is really that age that you're like, I'm 27 years old. I'm wise. I'm so much wiser than I was when I'm 21.
You're making a little money, you know.
And I still have my entire life in front of me.
Right. You can still party, though, you know, at 27.
You can still be a mess.
Right.
You are a lot smarter when you're 27 from when you compare yourself to your 21 or 22-year-old counterpart.
But definitely. I was an idiot at 21, 22 years old.
I was an idiot at 27, though. I'm an idiot now, so...
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You would agree that you're an idiot now, or I'm an idiot now?
Yes.
Both? Both?
Yeah.
I'll just take it as me. What's up, everyone? So we have a couple of things to talk about today. Hopefully we can get through everything. Danny, we're recording on a Monday, which is unusual. Usually we record on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. However, Danny's traveling to Austin, Texas.
Tejas
to you're going there to...
I am officiating a wedding.
You're officiating a wedding, right?
Yeah, this will be my 8th wedding. By the way, any people out there that's looking for an awesome officiant, I'm your guy.
That's what Danny's side hustle is, that he's a wedding officiator.
One of many.
He will be officiating my wedding, and he will be dressing up as Link, as Zelda.
I'm down. I'm so down.
I just don't think that my significant other would ever agree to that. However, that's my one contribution to any type of wedding planning in the future. However, let's get to the topics today. So the first thing we want to do is that we want to recap our last episode, because we were speaking about the Houthis and that really astonishing victory over Saudi Arabia. And then we want to hit the big news that is the US has announced that they're pulling out of Syria again. And what that means for, is the US going to do it? Are they going to do it full way? And then what does that mean for the Kurds? The US's favorite proxy. That's
an interesting way to put it. Okay.
The U.S.'s favorite proxy. But let's start. I want to talk about the Houthis because obviously when things like this happen, like that battle in Saudi Arabia where 3,000 soldiers were captured, and it was a really just incredible Houthi victory, you want to rush out and you want to talk about it as soon as possible because it's brand new. However, you have to wait a couple of days and usually probably around a week or so until you get some legitimate facts about what actually happened on the ground. And I don't know if you've been following this, but I've been following this for over the past couple of days, and I just been kind of just reading stuff about what actually happened in the operation. And I think that if you listen to our last episode, you'll definitely appreciate this and find this really interesting. So I'm going to start off talking about what actually happened and why it's so interesting. So the first thing that you got to point out is that this happened within Saudi Arabia's border.
Right.
Which is very interesting. So
huge. Right.
This was a 3-day operation that took place in Saudi Arabia. 2 of those days involved just herding Saudi-backed forces into these various valleys within the Najran regions of Saudi Arabia, which is located on the northwestern Saudi Arabian border. Of Yemen, or it's located in northwestern Saudi Arabia, right near the border of Yemen. And again, pull out a map if you want to see these things and know what the hell we're talking about, because it's just way easier to understand. But what you should know about this region in Saudi Arabia is that it's very desolate. and it's full of valleys and full of hills, like rocky hills and rocky valleys. So most of Saudi Arabia is just pure desert. Most of the areas that are not in the major population centers, but this is just it's trying to think of a good comparison. Maybe think of like a place in the Appalachian Mountains or something, just rocky hills. And so
a lot of good vantage points for people to scope out, right?
Yeah. So the Houthis have a tactic of just observing these valleys. And there were 3 Saudi-backed mercenary brigades in a Saudi regiment. So there were 4 major formations that the Houthis started firing on, and they started moving them into these various valleys that were already pre-dialed with artillery fired and drone strikes. So they were basically herding them like sheep and goats.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit when I was reading about it of like the Native Americans, how they used to corral a bunch of buffalo into like a corner and then just like kill them all, or like make them go off a cliff or some shit. It was just like that.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that all these operations, they took place in Saudi Arabia for a while. So, I mean, the actual fighting took place over a 3-day period. But this really shows you how much control the Houthis have within Saudi Arabia's own borders. So they don't have control over population centers within Saudi Arabia, but they have control over strategic hilltops and high ground where they can just fire on armored regions. And that really tells you something interesting, because I never would have really thought that. I never realized how much control Yemen had within the Saudi border. I don't know if you've ever heard anything like that.
No. I mean, like, obviously I knew that they had guns, right? And I knew that they were coming up in terms of like how well organized they were. And I knew that they had drones and all this other stuff, but this is an operation beyond what I thought was even capable. And I mean, like, I'm not trying to like pat them on the back or anything like that. I'm still indifferent about the Houthis in general, but this operation and the execution of the operation is definitely goes down, I think, in the history books for one of the craziest ones that I've ever read about.
Well, it's definitely one of the biggest annihilation victories in the past.
Right. Flawless victory.
In the past 20 years. It was an annihilation victory. Like, think of Mortal Kombat.
For
flawless
sure.
victory.
Hell yeah. Fatality and all.
Fatality. So what happened is that, for 2 days, they were just filtering them into this valley. And then they completely routed them. And a mercenary group with, like a Saudi-backed mercenary group has about 1,000 troops or so.
Right.
And then a Saudi armored brigade consists of about 100 armored vehicles.
LAV 25s, baby.
They have LAV 25s, which are Canadian weapon systems, and I believe the U.S. Marines use them.
Yeah. They're awesome.
Yeah, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the U.S. Marines buy them in bulk.
No, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
They're akin to the Bradley fighting vehicles. You know, like they're like troop carriers with guns on them and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Armored carriers. Yeah.
They're armored carriers though. And I mean, it just shows you how armed they were. So the Houthis end up killing about 450 troops, and they capture an additional 2,400. And they also captured dozens of Saudi officers.
So many of them, right? Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
Yeah, and you see from the videos that they put out, like the quarter-mile long, just like chain gang, basically of people that they were herding back to God knows where. I think they were bringing them back to Yemen, right?
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were nursing the ones that were injured up, and you feel bad for them too. Like you really kind of. I felt really bad for these guys who were captured, because you could just tell how poor they were. They most of them looked like they were probably from the Sudan or Chad, and they probably had when you become a mercenary like that, you have nothing. Like, that's why you resort to that. It's not because you want to fight for the princes. You're doing it.
Nobody gives a shit about the princes.
Yeah, no one gives a shit about the princes. You're doing it because you absolutely have nothing, and your family's probably starving. And honestly, it was just like not. It was pretty sad just to see that video and see these people in such desperation. To be completely honest, that was my immediate kind of thought.
Mm-hmm. But to your point, they were dressing their wounds, and like I think they were doing an okay job at like taking care of the folks that they actually did capture.
No, the Houthis weren't. They weren't massacring them. They weren't doing any type of ISIS style beheadings or anything like that, where they were beheading people on live TV and videotaping it. They weren't doing anything like that. They're not known to do stuff like that. However, it wasn't like it was just the tragedy of the entire situation kind of just hit a huge, it just kind of, you realize it, because not only the people in Yemen are suffering from this, but it's like a regional wide conflict that's dragging in just thousands of different people. And it's sad. It's sad to see people in desperation like that. That's like my number one observation of like that, where you have to resort into, becoming a mercenary for some fucking prince who's, waging this war mainly for greed. But I mean, back to the battle. Right? Back to the battle. So, they were herded into these valleys, literally like they were goats.
Right.
And it's like when you put a tank into a valley, it's like putting a tank into a city. It's very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. A lot of vantage points to be attacked on.
These valleys are like buildings.
Right.
And you see these guys who are dressed like the Houthis, who are dressed like Jesus.
Yeah, basically.
They're dressed like Jesus with Jesus sandals. They're running around and they're chasing these armored vehicles. And these guys who are driving these armored vehicles are freaking out and they don't know what to do. And it's like it was insane to watch the footage of this. Like these guys literally dressed, they couldn't have been anything more than a fisherman or something, or a goat herder. Maybe that's why they were so good at doing this. They like understood the basic concepts of herding, and
they know the terrain, and that's really important. Yeah,
they know the terrain, but it's insane to watch these guys dressed in like just garb, like old garb that could have been from the beginning of the 20th century, the 19th century, literally like the medieval times, just with guns routing this huge armored force. It's insane to watch. And they have control of those Saudi hilltops, which is huge. So that's kind of like a basic rundown of what happened. They totally just herded them like sheep. And I don't know how many times I've said that, but it's exactly what happened. And you know what this really tells you? It tells you how much. It's either the Houthis are just incredible or the Saudis are terrible.
A little bit of both, probably.
It's come out of the Pentagon how bad the Saudis are when it comes to fighting. Because when your army is all mercenaries, it's like, remember, you ever seen the movie 300?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
300?
Yeah, totally.
Xerxes.
Who hasn't watched that movie? Come on.
So, like, Xerxes has his
embrace
army
me as your king and as your god. Yeah,
is a slave army.
Yeah, totally, and they just got wrecked by all those Spartans. But no, totally. I mean, I think it's in stark contrast, right? So when we look at it, on the one hand, obviously these guys are dressed up in like sandals and like robes and stuff, and somehow they manage to corral all these like, armored fighting vehicles and thousands of men into these valleys, totally wreck them, right? On the other hand, what's up with Saudi Arabia? I mean, they have modern technology. They're like being supplied and outfitted by the United States, and then the third dimension that you're talking about is like the majority of these guys that were captured were like two mercenary groups of like 1,000 each. So it's like, all right, you got all these guns and you think you have the leverage because you have all the guns, but it comes down to like individuals, right? Like how well trained are the individuals, and the Saudi Arabians like made the wrong bet, right? They thought that throwing money at the problem will make them strong, and it didn't. It just didn't.
Well, when you're a mercenary, you don't really have the same incentive to fight as if you're fighting for your home country. You know what I mean?
Right. But I mean, even then, I can't imagine that they're training these mercenaries very well. They're just like, here's a gun. We got also a bunch of Lav 25s. You'll be fine. Like off to war.
But also, if you're a mercenary, like you're gonna put down your gun if you're gonna die and not get paid. Like, what's the point of fighting?
You're a sellsword, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a sellsword, it's much more likely that you're not gonna risk your life like somebody who is defending their own country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're just a mercenary and you're going to die in a military operation, you're going to be way more likely to throw down your guns and surrender than just run into gunfire. Like if you're not going to get a paycheck, then what's the point?
Right.
And that's the reason why these guys are doing it. It's because they're from really poor countries. And they're getting a paycheck. So that's what happened. It seems like the Saudis have kind of realized that they're losing. And I've yet to hear anything from the Pentagon or Washington. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Is there anything?
I mean, I haven't read anything about it from their side either. I think it's embarrassing, frankly, for them. It's embarrassing because they're so well armed by us, right? And we were helping them logistically in the war for a while, so it's embarrassing for us, frankly. That they're losing to a bunch of dudes in sandals, frankly. Dude. I don't know. It's embarrassing. That's probably why you're not hearing anything about it.
I've heard things about the military, about special forces guys saying that the U.S. should at least make they should become temporary allies with the Houthis to fight Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So,
dangerous territory, right? We usually back the wrong people. So I don't know.
I know, but they pointed that out. They said that we should. It may make sense to do that. It may make sense to ally with these guys and fight these worse guys, because there's no one worse than the Al-Qaeda, the Salafist,
for sure.
The Salafist head choppers. So
I don't disagree with you on that front, but I think this might be a really good segue to our larger conversation about pulling out of Syria, because we were allying ourselves with a specific group of people that were pretty good at killing some Salafist head choppers in the past, and those were the Kurds. So I think this is a good segue into our main topic here, pulling out of Syria.
Yeah, so we both have different views on this.
Yeah, we do.
So we'll probably debate this after you kind of give us the rundown of what's happening. I'll give a quick synopsis. The U.S. announced that we're withdrawing from northeastern Syria, and Turkey is going to the safe zone that was established between the U.S. and Turkey has expired, and Turkey is going to now invade the northern part of Syria and essentially wipe out the Kurds. They already started doing it. They started doing it today, I believe. Today's Monday, so they started. I believe there was an airstrike on some Kurdish controlled city. So that's happening as we speak right now. It probably won't last very long, because the Turkish army is probably the Turkish military is probably the best army in the Middle East. I don't think there's really one that compares to it. They have nuclear weapons. They're part of NATO. They definitely will be able to flatten that Kurdish region in probably a pretty short time.
Well, we'll see, because the Kurds have been fighting in that region for a very long time, and they're pretty dug in, and they're battle hardened at this point. So we'll see. Hopefully,
there's no way they last long against the Turks.
Yeah,
there's no way. They've already got flattened in Afrin.
I mostly agree with you on this one, but I wouldn't call them out just yet. They're pretty good at fighting Turkey. They've been doing it for a while, which is, I think, a good segue to talk a little bit about the Kurdish people. So, where do you even start? So the Kurds are actually the world's largest ethnic group without a state, right? So they're bigger than the Palestinians, bigger than, I don't know, name a, disenfranchised people. They have so many people, and they don't have a national identity. They don't have a sovereign nation. And I guess you can take this back pretty far, because they've been around for a very long time, and probably not a lot of people know who the Kurds are in the first place. So I'll give you a quick rundown. So way back in the 12th century, Sultan Ahmad Sanjar created the first Turkish province. I won't bore you too much with the details from the 12th century to the current era, but basically around the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the Treaty of Sèvres attempted to secure Kurdish autonomy, but failed because Turkey, Syria, and Iraq all refused to recognize Kurdish independence. And also Sykes-Picot didn't include them either, so there's that. So 3 years later...
no Kurdish state.
None.
What the fuck is a Kurd?
Yeah, exactly, right? That's the point, right? And they've been around for a very, very long time.
It's a question that we still ask ourselves to get today.
seriously, like they've been around for a very, very long time.
Well, most people think Kurds are Arabs.
They're not. They're not actually.
That's what people think, though.
Right, but they're not. So they've been around since. So we're jumping around a little bit, but they're today they're a Sunni Muslim majority, right? Like religiously, right? But they existed prior to Islam came to that area, and they do not self-identify as Arabs. At the moment, there's a bit of a split, but mostly that's where we're coming from. They're their own thing. They have their own language. They have their own culture. They have their own identities. And it's completely separate. And for hundreds of years, they've been just, get the shit end of the stick. So kind of going back to Sykes-Picot and the fall of the Ottoman Empire there, a couple of years after that, the world leaders signed the Treaty of Lausanne, which basically excluded the Kurdish people, right? So they were like, nope, sorry, you don't get a Kurdish people. So now they're split between 4 different nation states, basically. So there's Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, of course. That's the big one. I'm missing one. Which one am I missing, Henry? Syria, Turkey, Iraq, Iran. Correct?
Syria, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon.
Not Lebanon, too far.
You mean Kurdish populations?
Yeah. I'm forgot. Oh, yeah, it's
Syria,
Iran.
Syria,
Turkey,
Iraq,
Syria,
Iran.
Yeah.
Turkey. You're right.
So there's 30 to 40 million of them, by the way, if you wanted to know the number. And they live in Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. But all of those borders are in dispute. And specifically, if we're talking about Turkey, Kurds actually make up 20% of their population, right? That's huge, right? That's not a majority, but that is definitely a plurality. And just thinking about it from an American perspective, percent-wise, as far as a percent of the overall population, that's more than that's more than the 12.7% of Black or African Americans that are here in the U.S. According to the 2010 census, right? So that's a lot more, right? So they make up a really big block of the Turkish population, but for a really long time they just like I said, been getting the shit end of the stick. In 72. This guy named Abdullah Öcalan created the PKK, which was their communist Kurdish party, basically. And it was pretty much immediately listed as a terror organization by a bunch of states and organizations, including NATO, the US, the UK, Japan, European Unions, shit like that. But the United Nations and other countries like Switzerland, China, India, Russia, Egypt, places like that have not designated PKK as a terrorist organization. So it's like a little bit split there. But basically it was founded, like I said, in 78 by a bunch of students that was led by this guy Öcalan. And basically it was like a fusion of socialism and Kurdish nationalism. And they wanted to basically make their own state. They wanted to make a communist state specifically. And they wanted to call it Kurdistan, which was a pretty good name. So, I mean, the reasons why they wanted to do this was because they had been oppressed for a very long time in Turkey. And of course, every communist's greatest enemy, capitalism.
The Kurds are one of those historic groups that have been just really abused. I'll add that. They're along with the Jews, the Ukrainians, the Kurds are up there with one of the most abused. Definitely.
And just to give you an idea for like what was going on, basically everything from the use of the Kurdish language, their dress, folklore, even names were banned in those Kurdish inhabited areas. And even the government banned the word Kurd and Kurdistan or Kurdish temporarily, which is crazy, right? So, I mean, talk about being oppressed. You can't even say your name. Like, imagine if you're black in the United States and you can't even call yourself black. How crazy is that? That is a like a level of oppression that's beyond. Like, you can't, like, so what are they, Voldemort? He who shall not be named? Like, come on. Later on in 1980, basically they reinstated it. In 1980 they officially prohibited it in Turkey, like overall in both public and private life, which means that you could not even speak it privately in your home without getting like arrested or something like that. People were arrested, imprisoned, and worse, tortured, like the whole 9 yards, just for being Kurdish. I mean, this is far and beyond fucked up. And not a lot of people know about this, and it's only now becoming relevant because of what's going on in Syria. And I don't want to skip ahead too far, but, the Kurds have been basically fighting on our side for a very long time. Since the original PKK leaders, Öcalan's capture and imprisonment in 99, their whole movement has moved on from communism, and now I don't really understand their platform, but it's called democratic confederalism. And they also have largely stopped calling for a fully independent country. And have since been fighting with, allied forces in NATO and things like that in the region. So one big example is the Kurds sided, this is counter to that example. So the Kurds actually sided with Iran in the Iran-Iraq war, and Saddam Hussein basically wiped out a bunch of Kurdish villages, hit them with gas attacks, all kinds of crazy stuff. But since then, they've been exercising autonomy in Iraq since the Gulf War in the 90s. And actually, they're considered by the U.S. and many others to be one of Iraq's most stable entities, right? So, Iraq is fucked up. Till today, it's pretty messed up, right? But as far as the Kurdish-controlled areas, that's pretty stable. And then the Kurds in Iraq, their regional government, the Kurdistan regional government, and the Peshmerga security forces are actually the fourth largest ethnic group in the region, right? In the entire region. Fun fact, while we're talking about Iraq, the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters, were the ones who captured Saddam Hussein in 2003, and then the year later, they captured bin Laden's messenger, which led to the raid on bin Laden's complex, where we killed him. So
Allegedly.
What do you think? He's in Las Vegas with Elvis and Michael Jackson or whatever?
Let's not get into that.
No conspiracy theories for today.
Let's not get into that conspiracy theory.
All right. I guess my point here is that, they've been a stabilizing force in the region that's been tumultuous in a very, very big way. And very recently, they were a huge part in fighting ISIS, a massive part. They're very good at killing ISIS. And we've been supporting them, both with military weapons and training and logistics. And we credit a lot of our victories you can probably ask Trump, he'd probably say so himself, in annihilating ISIS in the region. They were instrumental. And they're not like the, moderate rebels that we're talking about. We're not talking about SDF here, we're just specifically talking about these Kurds here. And all they really want at this point, and I guess this is important to note, since they're broken up into 4 different countries, they're not one cohesive unit anymore, right? So parts of them still want a fully, unified Kurdistan that's completely across the board, capturing that entire area. But the majority of them actually just want to work with their host countries to gain almost like a sovereign status within their country, very much like how they have it in Iraq. And unfortunately, last year, they've been fighting against ISIS, and the moment that we declared victory and we, pulled out, and this was July 2018, the Iraqi army, along with the Iranian-backed Shia militias, invaded Iraqi Kurdistan just a month after they defeated ISIS in that country. And so it's the second we're done with their usefulness, we're all right, fuck you guys, we're off. We're off to the races. We're gonna go ahead and annihilate you. And this is largely in response to, a referendum that the Kurdish people passed for independence, which passed with 93% of the vote in favor of separation. I guess this echoes a little bit of the Crimea region of Ukraine, and how a lot of them voted to, leave the country. The Kurdish, on the other side over here, they all voted to leave the country. And after all of that they did for Iraq and the region in killing ISIS, they were met with this response, which was just, invasion, which is crazy. And now we skip to today, and I'll stop talking for a second because I needed to get a drink of water, but we skipped to today, and we're pulling out of Syria again. And the implications are crazy because they were one of our biggest partners in the region and one of the biggest reasons why we were able to suppress ISIS. And now that we're leaving that safe zone in the northwest of was it northwest or northeast, Henry, of Syria?
It's northeastern part of Syria.
Northeastern part of Syria. Oh yeah, right. In the top area where it borders with Turkey. Now that we've left that area, pretty much immediately, like you said in the beginning of this rant, the Turkish people are coming in. They're already starting their campaigns against the Kurds, and it's pretty fucked up, you know. And that's my opinion.
So
I'll stop.
I feel so. I have empathy for the Kurds. They've absolutely been historically abused. However, when you annex territory in a country and you start ethnically cleansing other inhabitants there, it's kind of difficult to sit back and say, oh, this is going to be a huge shock that they're going to be invaded. And it's obviously there's a lot of reports of them ethnically cleansing Arabs out of their territory that they took over. I mean, basically what happened is that during the Syrian war, when the government's forces were tied down defending the major population centers and near Damascus and Homs, the Kurds came and they annexed all that territory in northeast Syria. And that territory is a territory where there's more oil or where there's more natural resources. So it's important territory. And that's basically what happened. They annexed territory within Syria. And I'm fine for limited government autonomy type of thing where they have they have autonomy, kind of like a Hong Kong thing. However, what they were trying to do is that they were trying to create a state, and a state, even if let's just say all these Kurdish factions connected with each other, within Iraq and Syria, and they had some state, and the region was completely balkanized. Like, it's going to be just some dummy state because it doesn't have any sea access. It's going to have a smaller population than other countries within the Middle East. It's not going to be a state that has any chance of being really anything other than a dummy state for other powers. So it sucked for them because the U.S. they basically use them as a proxy. I mean, no, they use them as a proxy because the U.S. couldn't get support, or at least public support, for putting ground troops in Syria. So they said that the FSA was turning into be a disaster. So they went and turned to the Kurds, and they armed and they started using them as the U.S.-backed coalition because the other forces that they tried backing were completely either incompetent or they were double crossing them, and they ended up backing the Kurds. Terrorists. Or ended up being terrorists, so they backed the Kurds. And the Kurds had a public image of being Bukhshanist, right? That's what they technically are. And yeah, you're right, there are a lot of factions within the Kurdish. I think we're oversimplifying it to a really high degree. Absolutely we are. There are different, I guess, factions and levels of for sure, and of extremism within the movement.
Yeah, like I definitely can't stick up for or apologize for any wrongdoings that some Kurdish people might have done in terms of the ethnic cleansing. Mostly because I haven't read the same articles as you have. Maybe we'll align on that in another episode. But generally speaking, it's important to know that like the different populations of Kurds in different countries are pretty separate from one another. Even down to language, as I mentioned before, like the Turkish, Turkey only recently started letting them teach the Kurdish language only in private schools in Turkey. So like down to a language barrier, many of these Kurdish people don't even have the same like cohesive connection with one another. So it's entirely possible, and I'll take your word on this, that there are some factions of Kurdish people that were absolutely fucked up, and I abhor that, and I definitely think that that's totally wrong in any case. But another thing to say is that Turkey is going from Turkey, their sovereign state, and they're moving into Syria to wipe out people that are currently in Syria, right? If it's a problem that the Syrians annexed this area, then the Syrians should be doing something about it. Turkey shouldn't be moving in just to wipe out because they literally have a political, vendetta against the Kurdish people.
You're right. I agree with that. Turkey is fucked up, and the same reason why Turkey is doing that, why they're invading Syria, is the same reason why Russia stepped into the war, into the Syrian war.
Right.
Russia stepped into the war. I mean, there's the two main reasons why they stepped into the war was because they had port access within Syria. Mm-hmm. Their only Mediterranean port was located in Syria, and then the other big reason was because they didn't want a Sunni corridor linking up between Syria and
Iran,
and a Sunni corridor that would link up with the Chechnyan terrorists that are in Russia.
Right.
So they wanted to stop that from happening, and that was a big reason because a lot of the foreign fighters that are in Syria, a lot of the ISIS guys, a lot of the people in Al Qaeda, a lot of the really extremist ones are from former Soviet bloc states.
Yeah,
it's a big mix match of Arabs. It's a collection of the world's losers, basically. It's a big collection of the world's biggest losers who respond to like the jihadist propaganda, and they go and they try to start a caliphate in the middle of in Syria. I mean, that's what they are. Russia wanted to make sure that there was gonna be no connection between extremists within the Russian borders and the extremists within Syria. So they wanted to shut that down. Yeah. I think that's what Turkey is trying to. It's the same reasons. It's. I'm not saying it's right because the Kurds. I'm not trying to compare the Kurds with the extremist Salafist. However, I mean that's why they're doing it, and they're going to be doing it probably in a pretty bloody way. They hate the Kurds. They say it. They see it, or at least they say it is a national security threat to them, and they're going to do it. I mean, they've already started doing it.
Right, and they're only doing it because we pulled out. Now, to an earlier point you made, and I think this was important. If there was a Kurdistan, or even if they were like, loosely, autonomous within Syria and within Iraq and within parts of Turkey, just loosely autonomous on their own. You're absolutely right in saying that they would be landlocked. It would be hard for their economy to get a start, and they would be at risk of being like a puppet for other extremist groups. I'll counter that with a few things.
And they would just be dependent on foreign aid.
For sure.
They would be completely dependent on U.S. foreign aid. They wouldn't be able to exist without it. It would just be. It wouldn't be a state with an economy. It would be an ethno-state, landlocked, in front of neighbors who hate them. That would be completely dependent on foreign aid. It would be like Israel, honestly.
I hear that.
Israel has access to the Mediterranean, and
I hear that.
The education levels are way higher, and it'd be way worse in Israel. So what the thing they have in common is that they would be surrounded by neighbors who hate them. However,
ain't that the truth? And here's the thing about that. I'm glad that you brought that up because of the Kurdish a history of helping the United States and helping Israel, frankly, they would have allies within the region. So first of all, Bibi Netanyahu himself has come out, and said that, this is a bad idea, that they would love the Kurds to, be their own thing because they would see them as a friendly neighbor, in the region. And just to counter a little bit of like their...
Israel buys a lot of their oil from Iraqi Kurdistan.
That's right. And so
they buy a very large percentage of their oil from Iraqi Kurdistan.
Exactly. And to that point, in terms of setting up and establishing an economy, a lot of the areas that the Kurdish people would be occupying, if there was a Kurdistan, would be pretty oil rich. I mean, not like Saudi Arabia oil rich, to be very frank. It would be, but they would have a source of income, and they would have a national and sovereign unity. And they'd be able to express and practice their not religion, they're Sunnis. They'd be free to express and practice their culture and things like that. And we're not really talking about, particularly like whether or not they should be able to, have a language or a culture. But like the point is that in the nations that they've been co-inhabiting with other countries. Like, they've been historically oppressed, so I see a good reason for them to have their own thing, kind of like in the northwest of Iraq, right, where it's been traditionally very stable, has held off ISIS attacks, Iraqi attacks, Iranian attacks, have fought in a crazy-ass civil war in Syria. So they're not like this pushover state. I don't actually think that they would be as dependent as you make it out to be, Henry. I think they would have a source of income in oil revenues. They would have friendly neighbor in Israel. They would have most definitely they would have American support. Although shit, after what Trump just did, maybe not. And they would have the start to what they needed. I think. I don't think it would be as weak or as you put it.
I think they definitely would, because they can have oil, but they're going to have to use a pipeline to get that oil into the sea. If they want to just sell all their oil to Israel, then fine. But if they want to sell their oil to, it's sick. Israel is a population of less than 10 million people. So
right. Obviously they would need to partner
we're not
with
talking
them.
About.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to export their oil to the big oil markets in the east. So they're going to have a big problem.
They can definitely be a regional player, and I definitely agree that like they would need to get along with their neighbors for sure.
Well, it's really hard for them. It would be really hard for them. And I'm not saying that Turkey's in the right. I'm just saying that Turkey hates them, and that's the reality of the situation. They're a NATO ally,
right?
So you can't.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean shit, because of what Trump just recently said. How if they do something that he feels in his infinite wisdom, what did he say? In his unmatched wisdom, I'm loosely quoting Trump here, but that's pretty much what he said. In his unmatched wisdom, if they did something that he thinks is crossing a line, that he would absolutely destroy the Turkish economy. So NATO ally or not, like that doesn't mean shit to Trump or for anyone at this point.
Yeah, but Trump says a lot of shit and doesn't really mean it most of the time.
That's kind of what I'm worried about, because like we're pulling out of Syria, right? What I was worried about was literally happened the day of, right? Turkey comes in to try to wreck shit, and all we get from Trump is like, don't cross that line.
I know, the line's not even drawn. It's just like, what is that line? It's
his infinite wisdom. Whatever he thinks in his infinite wisdom is too far.
gassing the people.
Gassing
beautiful children.
Yeah, the U.S. is very good at red lines, are they?
Yeah, the red line.
Yeah.
I don't think that the U.S. is going to choose the Kurds over Turkey.
No, they're not, realistically.
Not realistically, soon. In any scenario, they'd have to have such horrible PR. Like, they'd have to be just repeating the Armenian genocide type of thing for the world's nations to be like, oh, okay, they're doing it again. They're doing it again. They're doing it again.
I mean,
how many mass genocides has Turkey been spearheading?
That's true.
Many throughout history. Many. There was a mass genocide of Christians when they sacked Constantinople. There was a sack of there was a humongous genocide of Armenians in the early 20th century.
That to this day is largely still unrecognized.
Which they still deny.
Yep.
They haven't recognized that yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making that up.
Nope.
They haven't recognized their genocide. It's funny because Hitler. It's not funny because of Hitler. Never
it's
say
funny
it's funny
because Hitler.
It's funny because of Hitler. Because Hitler, he was like, well, they didn't do anything. I'm not sure if this is a real quote from Hitler or not, but I was on a walking tour in Berlin, and the tour guide said this was a quote. So I'm assuming that a tour guide on a walking tour in Berlin is an absolute authority on the subject, right?
Yeah, probably.
I'm taking it as an authority.
Let's hear it.
He did know his shit. Like, don't get me wrong, this guy knew his stuff about World War II. How he said that it was Hitler. It was a British guy because all the tour guides are British. Hitler once said that he used the Armenian genocide as as an example of getting away with killing the Jews. So, I digress.
That's not fun.
I digress. All right, back to the Kurds. So, I don't know. I think they're swimming up Schitt's Creek without a paddle right now.
I mean, I find myself in a really interesting, like bringing this domestically a little bit. I find this weird for me because I'm now suddenly sitting in the same boat as people like Robert Pattinson and the folks on the Fox and Friends channel, Brian Kilmeade and Lindsey Graham. Suddenly
They don't give a shit about the Kurds.
No, they don't,
want the U.S.
Like, the
they just want the U.S. to have a
is...
presence in Syria and in the Northeast. That's all. They don't give a shit about the Kurds.
Right,
When do they become humanitarians? When did Bibi Netanyahu become a humanitarian?
Well, I mean, Lindsey Graham said it was irresponsible and unnerving to the core.
That's because he's basically paid off by basically every lobby in Washington.
For sure. What about Brian Kilmeade? Is he paid off? He said it was disastrous to leave the Kurds to fend for themselves.
It's disastrous to leave the Kurds and to leave a war that we never should have been involved in the first place. It's absolutely disastrous to leave. It's fucked up that the U.S. made false promises to the Kurds and gave them the expectation that we were going to stay there forever and support them and keep Turkey out from invading them. But it just shows you how fucked up U.S. foreign policy is to begin with, rather than... You can't keep on making the same mistake. Are we going to have just bases within Kurdistan and in northeastern Syria forever? I mean, that's within a sovereign country's borders. That's within the Syrian borders. It's not like some state. It's not like East Germany. Like we're literally, there's bases within the country of Syria. That the Kurdistan that was created was within a sovereign country with an elected president. You can't just have bases in there indefinitely. And now Turkey's going to go in there, and it's going to be a disaster in the area. But the U.S. should have nothing involved in it. They should not be involved in that. They should not be involved in that. They should not be involved in like these ceasefires with Turkey. They should let these Middle Eastern countries sort these things out within themselves, and not have troops there, not have bases there. It's a waste of fucking money. Well, the expenditures are nuts. The amount we spend on keeping forces and bases in the Middle East, it's been nothing but disastrous and painful. I mean, Trump was absolutely correct when he said that Syria was nothing but death. I agree with him on moving those troops out. And they're not going to be moving troops out of all of Syria, believe me. They're going to be, I'm talking like Trump now, believe me.
Believe me.
Believe me.
We keep the best forces in.
But believe me, they're going to keep, I guarantee you they're going to keep troops in that Al-Tanf area. And I mean, they're never going to allow a land bridge. I love that word. You mean a road? To connect Iran with potentially Hezbollah going through Iraq and Syria and into Beirut or really anywhere in Lebanon to hook up with Hezbollah to create a corridor where Iran can arm Hezbollah. So they're never gonna leave that base. They're never gonna leave that area. They used the Kurds as a proxy army to occupy Syria when they couldn't garner support to actually put boots on the ground. So they used them and abused them. And it's not Trump's fault because Trump inherited that problem. It's Obama's fault. Fucking Obama.
Well, if Trump moves through with this, which he will, he's going to lose favor with God because Patton Robertson said, and I'm going to quote him because it was funny. The president who allowed Jamal Khashoggi to be cut in pieces without any repercussion whatsoever is now allowing the Christians and the Kurds to be massacred by the Turks.
Oh, these fucking assholes can blow.
He said, hold on, this is the best part. Hold on. He says, the president of the United States is in danger of losing the mandate of heaven if he permits this to happen. Dude, how can you go against God? The mandate of heaven says we have to go in endless war in Syria.
The mandate of heaven says that we have to have an endless war and protect an ethno-state from being invaded by another bully state. So, no, it's...
all right, so barring like a Kurdistan or, even barring like... actually, I won't put any conditions on it. What do you think is a good, like, ending? What's a good conclusion for the Kurds here? What would you propose like a good conclusion for the Kurds be?
The best conclusion for them is to become part of Syria. Is to try to strike a deal with Assad where they can kind of govern autonomously in northeastern Syria, and at least there could be some brokerage between Syria and Turkey that would protect them. I think that would be the best course of action for them if they would have to go and become part of the Syrian government. I think that's really the only way, because during the Syrian war, when the Kurds tried to invade Al-Tanf, what happened is that there was a deal that was brokered out between Assad and Erdogan, where Assad turned off the air defenses because the Kurds were actually protected by the Syrian air defenses against the Turks. And when they went up to Al-Tanf, they ended up getting blown to smithereens from Turkish airstrikes. So their best chance is to broker a deal with the Syrian government. And I don't know what the economic situation would be, but to, I guess, open up that land to be used by Syrian companies to, I guess, export oil or to drill oil and just become back and become like a confederacy within Syria or something like that. That's your best course of action is to try to become part of Syria and try to get some autonomous rule in that area like Hong Kong. But I don't see any other solution for them, because the U.S. isn't going to side. Because Syria, all right, so Turkey will invade Syria to get rid of the Kurds, because now Turkey is on the same side as Assad now, because they have overlapping interests to get rid of the Kurds, because the Kurds right now are basically, I mean, they haven't really fought the Syrian army, and they've been fighting the same people. They've been fighting the same jihadists. So they've kind of been lined up with the same interest. However, they're still not allies. They just happen to be fighting on the same side. However, they're not friends, so it's kind of a good thing for Assad to have Turkey come in and take them out, because Turkey is not going to be able to. They're not going to want to fight Syria within a war. I mean, Turkey would still destroy Syria in a war. However, it wouldn't be as easy as taking on the Kurds.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't disagree with your judgment there on working with Syria and becoming a kind of an independent state within Syria, like operating under there. But I mean, if we're talking about like the parts of Turkey that did that in Iraq, they set up in northwestern Iraq, just along the border of that northeastern Syrian area that's controlled by the Kurds, and they were doing fine. And like I mentioned before, they were probably the most stable region in Iraq, throughout all the many years of turmoil in Iraq. And the moment that, ISIS left, what we saw last year was Iraq started invading them. Iraq and Iran, frankly, started invading them just because they don't like them. So like I'm skeptical about, even that being an option, because it seems like, you can't even get off the ground, because before they even can try and start having talks with Assad about setting something like that up, the Turkish forces are already rolling into Syria, and I'm actually also concerned that Turkey's just not going to leave that area after they capture it. I think they're going to annex it, frankly. I think they're going to say, we got to take this because the Kurds, right? And then that'll roll up into a bigger conflict.
That will be probably a bad move for Turkey at the end, because they're going to have to spend a lot of money on occupying that area, and it's not going to be like a fun. I think they're going to just march on in there, but they're still going to have to deal with an insurgency if they start occupying it. So I don't think that's going to be
insurgency. It's going to be a tough one for them, dude. Honestly,
it's not going to be a fun thing for Turkey to deal with. No. It's probably going to become a war of attrition if there's a pretty large.
And if we learned anything from the beginning of the show, the dudes in the sandals that know the region and know the terrain, man, they're pretty dangerous. So
yeah. I guess that is similar. And just to go back one thing, so all these guys who have crocodile tears over the Kurds right now, like Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, fuck those guys. They're not being. They don't
give a flying shit about anyone outside.
It makes me feel weird that they're like at least like.
Well, that's how you know you're on the wrong side.
Fuck you.
You can because Lindsey Graham.
This is ruining my opinion.
Lindsey Graham. I don't know what happened after because he started actually condemning the war in Yemen for
like out of nowhere. That was
out
weird.
Of nowhere. It was after they killed Jamal Khashoggi because that's what everyone started caring about Yemen. Again, that was a pretty horrifying thing, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But that war in Yemen was going on years before the war in Yemen, and no one really batted an eye at it. And no one cared. It took the murder of a Washington Post journalist for people to care at all. So these guys who cry crocodile tears when they're just gung-ho about getting into every other war in the world, and they're disingenuous and they're full of shit. And I would examine my position if I was on the same side of them. I guess I ended up on the same side. We both ended up on the same side as Lindsey Graham when it came to Yemen.
Yeah, right.
However, I have my suspicion. I mean, the Saudi war in Yemen was such a disaster.
Hey,
it's hard to look at.
I mean, you know what they say, but let's give Lindsey Graham a pass on this one. A broken clock is right twice a day. So, maybe he's authentic.
Lindsey Graham, a guy who needs to have his head examined, is one weird man.
All right, well, maybe we can wrap that here. I don't think we're going to get any further. Before we jump into Q&A, I just want to make a quick little announcement to our listeners here at Bro History. There's an awesome new app out that is called Escape the Vape, and it's available on Android and iOS, and you can download it right now. It's an awesome, awesome app. Think about all of those apps out there that help you to quit smoking. Well, this one is if you are hooked on the Juul, like I am, and you can earn awesome badges and learn all about how not vaping will save your life. So go ahead and download that shit now. They're a sponsor of ours, and we thank them for supporting the show.
Yeah, every single time that Danny, he vapes in the background, and when either of us, when I'm on editing duties and I hear the vape, because I don't notice it when we're actually talking, I'll hear the vape on editing duties, and I'll be like, Danny, what the fuck? I'll be so mad. I'm like, I heard a vape. Ah! And like, I'll always text Danny, and it'll be at like 4 a.m. I'll be like, what the fuck?
The vaping.
Vape. Stop the vaping. Stop the vaping.
So hopefully this app will help me escape the vape, and it'll make our show better. And by downloading their app, you'll be supporting the show, so go ahead and check it out. Again, that's Escape the Vape. It's available on iOS and Android today.
All right. Thank you, Escape the Vape. Thank you, Escape the Vape.
Thanks.
All right. So let's jump into the good old
Questiones.
The Q&A. We don't really have that many. You guys have been slacking.
Yeah, right?
What
Hit us
the
up.
fuck?
Info at Bro History. It's real.
Info at Bro History is where you send the stuff. We're recording this early, so we'll probably get all the
questions like tomorrow.
All right. We have one.
We got two.
Oh, we got two. Oh, all right. So the one is about the North Korean launching a ballistic missile from a submarine last week.
So did you guys hear about North Korea launching ballistic missile from a submarine last week?
I did not.
I did. Yeah, I did. It was pretty interesting. Actually, I'd like to in the future do an episode on submarines, because I think that's the one like military tech that we haven't done yet. But it's pretty incredible. I mean, obviously, I want to dig into this a little deeper so that we can talk more at lengths at North Korea's new round of their war against Atlantis, which is what I call it, because they've been launching rockets into the sea again. But this is a big step, and the reason
you came up with that,
the war against Atlantis. No, I didn't. I got that somewhere.
Oh, that would have been great to coin. That's so funny.
No, I mean, they've been making some strides, and I think this one is a particularly big one for a couple of big reasons. So, one, we already know that the current ballistic missiles that North Korea have been using, have the capability to strike in the region, right? And their longest range weapons could maybe strike Guam, maybe long shot hit Hawaii, but like largely we've been like, never gonna happen, not gonna come anywhere near us. Well, this recent round that they've been doing since the since earlier this summer of ballistic missile testing has been increasing, and the fact that they were able to successfully launch a missile, a rocket from a submarine, makes their range capabilities so much wider. So why, Henry? Why is this a big deal? Well, if you got a rocket that can go, say, I don't know, 1,000 miles, right? Then if you shoot it from the land, you can only go 1,000 miles. Makes sense, right? But if you put it in a submarine and you make that shit swim all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and stay in your international waters,
then I drink your milkshake.
Exactly. They're going to drink the shit out of your milkshake. So
you know that reference, right?
No, I don't actually. What the fuck are you talking about?
It's the best reference in the world. You'd ever seen There Will Be Blood?
I didn't.
You got to watch the movie's phenomenal, so go watch. The film is phenomenal. It's not a movie, it's a film. It's very good. It has the best ending I've ever seen in a film. And it involves it's Daniel Day-Lewis.
I'll have to check it out.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Of course. Abraham Lincoln.
The Abraham Lincoln, also Bill the Butcher.
Right.
He plays an oil baron who's just... It's a story of an oil baron making his wealth, and it's just phenomenal. It's a phenomenal film.
Thanks for the
recommendation. Same guy who made Boogie Nights. The same guy who made... I forget the director's name, but the writer of Boogie Nights. Or not the writer, the director of Boogie Nights. All right, I digress.
Anyway, so like I was saying, they put it on a submarine, and they can go into the water and come closer to the United States, or frankly anywhere they want. As far out as their little submarines can go, and that feasibly increases the range at which they can launch their rockets. Right, so this becomes a problem. Now, don't worry too much. I'm not saying get nervous, because unfortunately for the North Koreans, and fortunately for everybody else, they use old diesel power submarines, which means that they're fucking loud as hell, and you can hear them coming a mile away, so they're not super stealthy. So we'd know if they were swimming around in the ocean, but it is a big ocean, so something we got to pay attention to, and I'd love to dig into this a bit more for a future episode.
Yeah, we got to do some more North Korea stuff. We haven't really been doing it that much, just because they really haven't been in the news. Last episode, I recommend listening to our podcast on North Korea that we released about, I don't know, like 6 months ago or so. During the Hanoi Summit, we released a couple of podcasts on them, and I thought they were actually really good because we went over basically like what North Korea had in their artillery, in addition to their nuclear warheads and their nuclear program. I think that's a good resource. Not just because we did it. I think it's actually pretty good. If you want to learn more about North Korea, listen to that podcast by Bro History. I'm pitching ourselves.
Thanks, Bro History.
Thank you, Bro History. The other question is just from my friend who sent me one. And it's just about the protest at Wall Street today.
Yeah, I've been spending all day at home today because it's my birthday, but I didn't see this, so tell me all about it.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is that there was a protest at Wall Street today, and it was a climate change protest.
Okay.
It was just a complete shit show. It was they splattered the Wall Street Bull with blood, with fake blood.
That's funny.
They had signs of like no more nuclear energy, which was weird.
That's strange.
That's strange. And there was no coherent message or anything. It was just a party for these people. And I had a lot of protest movements because I was there. And I wasn't there at the protest. I passed it. And there was it was just a lot of bums.
Like,
to be nice.
Like just homeless people?
Just jobless people. It was just a lot of bums.
Well, I mean, if you're protesting in the middle of the day, I always question, don't you have a job?
And it was just kind of gross. Like, people were dressed. The thing I hate about these protests, and I'm not going to try to make a statement on climate change or any of that, but a lot of, and this goes for things that I agree with too, like Julian Assange rallies and stuff like that, and like free Assange rallies, and a lot of like anti-war rallies, and a lot of like Palestine rallies. You go to like these rallies, or these protests, they're always fucking filled with people who don't understand the issue whatsoever. And you'd have a hell of a lot more luck if you called your congressman and you spoke to them about the issue and you said, hey, this is going on. Why don't you call your state assemblyman? Like, learn the process of local government and do it that way, because you're going to get a hell of a lot further with your political activism with a suit on and talking to people and lobbying yourself and going to talk to congressmen and going, like, you're just going to, yeah, the protests are valuable and stuff, but like when you start dropping blood on statues, and just littering and causing, I mean, you're hurting you're polluting because the place was a fucking mess. I passed this place; it was garbage everywhere. It was gross. So people who are involved, a lot of people who get involved in this political activism, they're just in it for the party. You know what I mean? And it's really annoying because there's a lot of things that I agree with a lot of these political campaigns, but people don't know what the fuck they're talking about half the time. You know, like you'll go to a Julian Assange thing and people will be talking about God knows what. You know, they'll just be talking about like the corporations, blah 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 blah. They're not going to be actually talking about Julian Assange and what happened and why the case is bullshit. Like, people need to get educated on things before they start getting involved in activism.
I only partly agree with you. So I agree that people should definitely call their Congress people and their assembly people to get shit done. But
war in Iraq, the protests in Iraq on the Iraq war didn't do anything. There was humongous protests for the Iraq war.
I disagree with that too. I don't think they do nothing. I think they do something. I think they call attention to those matters. And like, do you think the media is going to pick up on like niche issues that you call your assemblyman for? No, they're not going to pick up on that shit. And frankly, Congress doesn't do shit until it becomes like a big national story that's covered by every mainstream media. So there is a place for assembly. I mean, these people are just exercising their freedom of assembly, and I think it's beautiful. Do I think that they're all cohesive? Absolutely not. I mean, Occupy Wall Street is like one of the biggest examples. Like, most of the talking points that came out of Occupy Wall Street I agreed with, but at the same time I totally disagreed with the fact that so many of them were completely incoherently just
Joe Rogan had the best take on this out of anyone on Occupy Wall Street. It's a bunch of white blood cells who are mad, but like they know that they should be mad and they're pissed off, but they don't know who to be mad at, so they're destroying everything. Like, that's how he described. Like, the way he worded it was really well. I'm paraphrasing him. I'm paraphrasing him right now, but he did it. He described Occupy Wall Street really well.
I mean, I take your. I side with you on the fact that, you know, they should, if they're there for a climate, and, you know, like a climate protest, and they're then littering and things like that. Like, that's oxymoronic in every sense of the word. But also like defacing shit. Like, if you're there to protest, like, I'm all about peaceful protests. You know, if you want to do your march, like, there's ways to organize a protest where you get, you know, police presence to like make sure that you're safe and that cars don't fucking hit you, and that, you know, that you can walk through and speak your voice and shit like that. Like, I definitely think that you should be able to do that. But I'm not for defacing property or breaking windows or, like, to your point, littering and shit like that. That's fucking messy and bad. And it just hurts the it hurts the message. And to your point, I guess maybe their message wasn't super solid in the first place, but I wasn't there. I didn't read about it yet. This is brand new for me. My point is that people should be allowed to assemble, and I think there's a lot of value to that because it brings the attention where the attention needs to be brought. And yeah, you're going to get a bunch of people who don't know what the fuck they're doing, but you know what? That's another body. You know, how does this sound? 100 people who know their shit were protesting at Wall Street about something, or 10,000 people, most of them that don't know their shit, protested against some shit. Like, which one's going to end up in the news? Obviously the 10,000 one, right? So there's some usefulness to that.
The thing is, though, is that it causes people who would be, when you see one side behaving like that, when you see someone who's acting on behalf of a political cause or a cause or just any cause behaving poorly, then it reflects bad on the cause itself.
For sure.
So
yeah, I'd agree with that.
Let's just say, for example, if you're at a pro-Palestine rally or something like that, and you're behaving like a complete jackass, you're making that whole movement seem like a farce. You're making that movement seem like and then meanwhile, the other side is going to be in suits and ties, and they're going to be speaking politely, and they're going to be knocking door to door, speaking to politicians. So you're just setting yourself up for failure. If you
I'm all about the all above
like that, just don't be a jackass.
I agree
if
with
you're protesting somewhere.
You heard it here at Bro History. You can go protest, but don't be a jackass.
Yeah, and don't ruin people's commutes.
Yeah, maybe read the Facebook invite and learn a little bit about what you're protesting, so that if
what are we protesting?
If you get caught by a camera, you know?
Chick-fil-A. Why? The chicken just tastes too good to be real.
I mean, whatever it is that you're protesting, just maybe do a quick Google search. I mean, almost everybody. Oh, my fucking phone went off when I said that.
If you have to do a quick Google search before the protest to get you inspired the protest, then chances are you don't know the nuance of the issue.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, but that's why I'm encouraging everyone to Google it, right? Because they might find out, hey, do I really care about this? You know, is this important to me? And if it is important, and you do want to go protest, go for it. Go do it. Do it peacefully. Don't wreck shit. You know, use the proper channels, and then also follow that shit up with real political action, and that's, you know, put the suit on, go to Congress, you know, call your senator, do what you need to do all of those things. That's, I think, in all of the above is how you make the change. You want to call attention to something with a giant protest, cool, but then you got to follow that shit up. Bother the hell out of all of your Congress people. A lot of these protests are they're hijacked by careerists and opportunists and just frankly people who are bored. Like the fucking women's marches in New York City. What the hell? I know people who went to those protests, who went to those women's marches, who couldn't name their own senators. They can't name their own governor. They can't name any. They don't know. They're totally ill-informed about every single issue, and yet those are a lot of the people who I know. Yeah, but I mean, while I think that's terrible that they can't name their own senator and shit like that, you don't need to know the name of your senator to feel like women have been oppressed or that women deserve equal rights in this country. I don't. Here's my liberal coming out. I don't think.
Yeah, but then they go and they just make a mockery out of the situation where they wear pussy hats and they're just vulgar, and anyone who's looking at them
knowing
sees
who
them
your senator is
poorly.
has nothing to do with that.
You should know a little bit.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to do with the issue at hand.
Are.
You know, it's like shit. We, you know, there's plenty of shit that we don't know about. Nevertheless, we feel strongly about topics that we do know about, right? So, I don't know. I don't like that. I mean, I'm not saying that what you're saying is disparaging, but what I am saying is that you don't have to be informed about every single thing just to engage in political action, and the freedom of assembly is a tenet that's in, you know, the United States blood. You know, it's a part of our Constitution, the right to assemble, and I think people should be free to exercise it, just in the same way that idiots in this country are free to say whatever the fuck they want, you know, because of the First Amendment. Also, idiots in this country should be allowed to protest shit even if they don't know who their senator is.
You heard it. You should protest if you don't know who your senator is. You should protest the Department of Education for not teaching you basic stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to end it with that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us today. Things may change between now and Monday with both of the stories that we covered, so don't leave your complaints for the internet, and and rate and review the podcast. We are almost at 200, which would mean a great deal. I'll just say that, and we're hitting that number, and look forward to releasing our next episode. And Danny, when do you get back from the great state of Austin? Are you going to be saying hi to our friends?
Hell yeah, I will. I'm probably going to link up with Mr. Sue while I'm out there, so maybe we'll do a little collab while I'm out there. Who knows? It'll be fun.
Yeah, you should do that. Shout out to Mr. Sue, of a boy named Sue. Very good podcast, and you guys should be listening to it. And Danny, I'm happy you're going to be getting to meet him. He's a cool dude.
Definitely.
All right. Peace, guys.
See ya.